Good afternoon, shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers out there in YouTube land. Today we're actually putting back together a 2008 Mitsubishi Eclipse with a 2.4 four-cylinder overhead cam engine. We just put a water pump on it, took it apart to replace the crankshaft position sensor. They're going to keep saying cam. It's crankshaft position sensor because it wouldn't start. And when I had it apart, I noticed that the water pump was leaking, and somebody had already had it apart, put a timing belt on it, and I think at that time they'd put a water pump on it, but it was a crappy one and it was leaking out right there. Anyway, we replaced that and confirmed that our tensioner pulley is good and our idler pulley is good, and we've got our timing marks set up. Because the crankshaft bolt is already in, you can't see that the keyway for the belt is at the 9 o'clock position as we'd be looking at it here. It would be right there, and the timing mark is up there around 10:30, 11 o'clock position. You see the little hole in the tone ring there, and it points to that little pointer casting in the oil pump housing. And the oil pump, there's a triangular shape that's cast into the oil pump housing, and it points to the little dot and the arrow in the oil pump pulley. And the balance shaft pulley, obviously the crank gear would be in the same place, and you got a mark here, a little notch there in the oil pump casting, and then the triangle pointing at that notch in the casting. And then this is how you set the tension on that. But anyway, that belt is okay. We're not going to replace it either. But we've confirmed that our timing marks are set up. You want to go ahead and get your marks set up before you take the belt off, unless the belt's broke. And then I'm not sure, but I think these engines are free running, so if your belt was broke, you can go ahead and turn your crank and get it lined up, but turn it over gently, and if you hit a stop, then you know that a piston is hitting a valve, and you want to turn your cam. But if the belt's broke, chances are it's already bent the valves anyway. But anyway, you take this cover off down here. You want to be careful. Whoever taking it off to replace the belts before in the water pump weren't so careful, and they cracked that cover. The cover goes on like that right there, and your crankshaft, your harness connector for your crankshaft position sensor goes in right there, and that harness runs down through the cover and comes out right here. And well, let's see. Here's the old sensor. So when you put the cover on, it'll go over like that, and the nut that goes right there will pull this down, so that connector it makes a tight connection. I could not find a new cover in the time frame that I had. They broke it across here, but where that nut goes over there, it'll hold this down good enough that we're just going to go ahead and go with it. But just keep in mind that these covers aren't real durable, and as you can see here, they'll break. So let's start working on getting the cam belt put back on. Now we got the belt around the crank pulley and on the oil pump housing, or oil pump pulley, and inside of the idler pulley, and going up when you replace this, then you're obviously going to have to take your your engine mount. You have to take it apart so you can get the belt. This goes through it and it'll be trapped. So you'll have to jack the engine up to hold it up to get it out of there. Yeah, we'll go up top. Now the camshaft has got a notch in it right there, right in front of my finger. Let's see, I can get the light in a better spot. Looks like a little cut, and it lines up with the notch in the valve cover. So it'd be right on the back side of that tooth. And anyway, we want to work from the front side, pull the slack out of the front side of the belt, and pull it up over the cam gear. And okay, got that on there. And just check, make sure. See the notch? Hard to get the right angle. See, the camera shows the same thing that I'm seeing. Lined up perfect. Go back underneath. You can see that's lined up. And that's lined up. And then we'll take and turn this tensioner bolt, or tensioner pulley I mean, and adjust it so that we're taking the bulk of the slack out of the timing belt. You rotate this counterclockwise because it's eccentric, it's off center. When you rotate it that way, that'll bring that the slack out of the timing belt, but this is pulled all the way down. It pivots on this mount bolt right here. It pivots on that mount bolt. But anyway, so you push that up, and your tensioner mounts right here. And here's your tensioner. And I've already got it reset and locked. But you set it in a vise like this, and like between my thumb and forefinger, and slowly squeeze that in until you can put a pin through there. And that's how you lock it in place. And it's I don't know, I guess it's got a hydraulic action within itself, but it's not oil fed like some of them. But you set it back up in there. And so you got a little bit of clearance there. Hang on a minute. So those bolts are back in. I still got the pin in there. And I try to move that, get my finger in there. So there's not a whole lot of play, so it don't have to take up a whole lot of tension. Then you just pull that pin out. Get my camera out of the way. I pulled that out, and that pressure pin, you can see it start, the hole no longer lines up where that pin went through, so it's starting to expand and applying tension on this cam that tensions that belt. But all of this tensioner cam assembly has to come off to get that water pump off. But anyway, we'll check our timing marks again. That one's good. Dadgum magnet. That was good. And I'm sure the cam is good. We'll get this bottom cover put on right quick. Hey, we've got that cover back on, and that's where that nut goes on, where the cover connector goes onto the crank sensor. Just be gentle with it, make sure you get it lined up, and it goes on. And it will get the water pump pulley put on, and we'll go up top and put the top cover on, get the crank pulley put on, and then we'll put the serpentine belt on. These 4 little bolts that go in the water pump pulley are kind of recessed up in here, but they're accessible. And I use a 1/4 inch ratchet with a shallow socket to get to them, and then just good and snug is all they need, and they don't have to be torqued down to 89 foot-pounds. But anyway, get them tight. Then the the serpentine belt idler pulley goes on. It goes on right here. And obviously check the bearing in it, make sure it's not dragging or squalling. It'd be a good time to replace it if it was. Then your serpentine belt tensioner, it goes on right there on the oil